Hello everyone, this is chapter 15 part 2 of the Monopoly. In this part, we'll be talking about the monopolist's decision to how much to charge and how many to produce. We are familiar with how many to produce decision. A perfectly competitive firm chose its optimal level of quantity, profit maximizing quantity, or the best level of production such that it equalizes marginal revenue with marginal cost. Okay, so monopolist will do the same thing, all right, but monopolist will actually get to choose its price too. So monopolist will also determine its own price. We'll learn more about that. In the previous part, in part 1 we talked about how supply side is for a monopolist is exactly the same as in the perfectly competitive market structure. However, we said that the demand side is different. Okay, so now let's see what that difference is. Okay, so we'll talk about demand curve, average revenue, marginal revenue for a monopolist. Let's get started. So let's remember the perfect competition. A perfectly competitive industry and a perfectly competitive company have totally different demand curves. Here is the perfectly competitive industry. Here is the industry demand curve, downward sloping. Here is the industry supply curve. When I say industry, I mean those group of companies, like many perfectly competitive individual companies. They come together to give rise to the supply curve. Demand curve is the market demand curve, and a perfectly competitive company is actually going to have a totally different demand curve. It's going to have a perfectly elastic demand curve. Okay, and remember, price was equal to its marginal revenue, which was equal to its average revenue, and its demand curve for a single company. This is not going to be the same for a monopolist, because in a monopolistic structure, because you have only one firm, okay, firm and industry are the same thing. There is no difference between a firm and the industry. So a monopolist is faced with a downward sloping market demand curve. So the entire market belongs to just one company. What we'll see for a monopolist is that the demand curve will be equal to average revenue and price. However, these are not going to be equal to marginal revenue. And this is the relationship we're going to have. Demand, average revenue, price will be equal to each other. However, marginal revenue curve will lie below the demand curve. Okay, so if this is demand curve, industry or market demand curve for a product monopolist is selling, we will be proving shortly. Marginal revenue curve actually looks like this, lies below. It can actually become negative. Okay, demand equals to average revenue, just like in perfect competition, and price. However, marginal revenue always will lie below it. So let's explore. The best way to learn about this is to take a look at this example. Let's say we're talking about a coffee shop named in the middle of nowhere. So I strategically named this coffee shop in the middle of nowhere because it is the only coffee shop, let's say, in a Midwest town, and there's no other coffee shops in a 200-mile radius. Okay, so basically, while you can drink coffee at home, however, going to a coffee shop with your laptop to study and such, it's a totally different experience. So let's say this coffee shop owner thinking that, I am the monopolist in this town, so I'm gonna set price of per cup of coffee $11. Okay, that's super high. So obviously nobody comes to buy coffee from him. If he drops the price to $10, one person comes per hour to drink coffee. Maybe that's the richest guy in town. If the price of coffee goes down to $9, he sells 2 cups of coffee per hour, and it goes on and on like this. Okay, so these numbers are basically you don't have to make up these numbers. These are given in this example. So this actually tells you if the price of coffee is $1 per cup, which is super reasonable, then there's 10 customers per hour. Okay, so this basically is the demand curve, right? We learned about this in the demand, supply, and equilibrium chapter. So let's calculate the total revenue of this monopolist. Then we'll calculate average revenue, then marginal revenue. Total revenue is super easy. Total revenue is price times quantity. So at each price level, we're going to multiply price with quantity to find the total revenue. So 11 times 0 is going to be 0. 10 times 1, $10 total revenue. 9 times 2, $18. So if the price of coffee is $8, you sell 3 cups, 24. $7, 4 cups, 28. $6, 5 cups, 30. $5, 6 cups, 30. $4, you sell 7 cups, 28, and so on. Okay, so look at this. Total revenue goes up first and it starts coming down. Okay, we learned about this in the elasticity chapter, why this is happening. Okay, let's calculate average revenue. Average revenue is total revenue. Okay, let's clear some of the stuff on the slide. Average revenue is defined as total revenue right here. So total revenue divided by quantity. Okay, so what I'm going to do, 0 divided by 0, that's undefined. Try to put it on a calculator, you'll see 10 divided total revenue divided by 1, quantity 10, total revenue $18 divided by 2, 9, 24 divided by 3, 8, $28 of total revenue divided by 4 cups, 7, 30 divided by 5, 6, 30 divided by 5, I messed it up. $28 divided by 7 is 4, 24 divided by 8 is 3, and 18 divided by 9, 2, and 1. Okay, so this is your average revenue. And if you look at this average revenue, I want you to take a look at average revenue column and compare it with the price. Look at that. As long as you're producing a positive level of output, these two columns are identical. So rule number 1, price equals demand. Obviously it tells you the demand relationship here equals average revenue. Okay, how about marginal revenue? Is it going to be equal to marginal revenue as well? Well, to find out about that, what we need to do here is actually we need to calculate the marginal revenue. Remember the definition of marginal revenue: change in total revenue when you change quantity. Okay, so total revenue, let me just say it one more time: change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. By the way, this only says T, but it's supposed to be total revenue. I would like to correct that. Okay, so change in total revenue, marginal revenue for the 0 units is obviously can't be calculatable. You can calculate that. So change in total revenue. So I'm looking this column. Okay, divide by change in quantity. I'm going to look at the changes in this column. Okay, so let's do this with another color. Okay, so change in quantity 0 to 1. So you're going to divide by 1, accompanied by change in total revenue from 0 to 10. So 10 minus 0 is going to give you 10. 10 divided by 1, you're going to get 1. Let's find the marginal revenue for the second unit. Okay, so change in total revenue 18 minus 10, right? Associated with a change in quantity is 2 minus 1 is 1, so it's 8 divided by 1. You're gonna get 8. You know what? Quantity It's super simple. In every case, quantity is changing by 1 unit. Therefore, you're going to be dividing the change in total revenue by 1. So it's going to be itself. Therefore, let's just find the change in total revenue. 18 to 24, it is positive 6. 24 to 28, total revenue increased by 4 units. 28 to 30, total revenue increased by 2 units. 30 to 30, 0. Total marginal revenue is 0. 30 to 28, marginal revenue is negative 2. 28, total revenue decreases from 28 to 24. Therefore, change in total revenue is negative 4. 24 to 18, negative 6. And finally, negative 8. Oh my gosh. So when you sell, okay, starting from the 7th coffee, marginal revenue, additional revenue is actually negative. It's very interesting. Okay, so this is the demand. Demand equals, we established that price equals average revenue, right? We said that. Look at marginal revenue. After the first unit, marginal revenue, let me clean it up a little bit. After the first unit, look at that. So I'm just gonna mark the columns that are equal to each other. Okay, so price column, demand describes the demand relationship equals to the average revenue except for the unit 0. Okay, and marginal revenue is always less than this after the first unit. Look at that. 998, 886, 774, 662. Okay, so marginal revenue is always smaller. Let's see this graphically. If you actually graph this, demand curve, average revenue, and price will look like this. And marginal revenue curve is always below the demand curve. Let me just generalize this. For a monopolist, you're gonna have a downward sloping demand curve, which is equal to average revenue, which is also equal to your price. Okay, your marginal revenue curve will always be, it starts like this. Oops. Your marginal revenue curve, okay, sorry about that. Your marginal revenue curve, okay, I got this time. Your marginal revenue curve will be below this demand curve, and it will actually divide this area, this triangle below demand curve, in two equal portions. So these distances should be equal. So put that. Okay, and let me erase the signs. And just wrap things up. Demand, average revenue, price are equal to each other. Marginal revenue will always lie below these. Why is it going to be important? Why am I learning this? You can ask, you know why? Because the rule was marginal revenue equals marginal cost to find the optimal level of output. Remember step number 1? So we're going to have a marginal cost curve here. Marginal cost equals marginal revenue. You're going to determine the optimal level of output for a monopolist. Then next step will be determining price by using the demand curve. We'll talk about that in the next part. Okay, to sell more, therefore, if a monopolist wants to sell more output, it must decrease the price. So when you decrease price, we know that quantity demanded will go up. However, remember the elasticity chapter, total revenue may go up or down. And this concludes part 2.